I still remember the exact moment Margaret Wilson lost her mind. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in early November, and I was out fetching the newspaper in my slippers when she planted herself on the sidewalk, smartphone aimed at my face like a weapon. "I'm documenting the destruction of our neighborhood standards," she bellowed, loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear. Her face had gone the color of an overripe tomato, veins pulsing at her temples, and that satisfied smirk told me everything. She wanted me to explode on camera. The neighbor's curtains twitched. A dog barked 3 houses down. And Margaret kept filming, zooming in on my unshaven chin, my coffee-stained robe, my bare feet on the cold concrete. But let me back up, because this story didn't start with Margaret's meltdown. It started the day I moved into 2127 Maple Ridge Lane, a beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch overlooking Crystal Lake. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and the kind of view that makes you believe in fresh starts after 55 years of grinding corporate life. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Linda who'd sold half the houses in Pine Valley Estates, had been crystal clear. My lot sat exactly 47 feet outside the HOA boundary. I triple-checked the survey before signing, even drove metal stakes into the ground myself to mark the line. This was my sanctuary, my independence, my hard-earned retirement dream after decades of answering to bosses who cared more about quarterly reports than human beings. The moving trucks pulled away on a golden September afternoon, leaves just starting to turn. I'd barely unpacked the kitchen when the doorbell rang. There stood Margaret Wilson, mid-50s, steel-gray hair in a bun tight enough to cause migraines, navy blazer pressed to perfection like she was running for suburban mayor. She clutched a leather portfolio stuffed with papers and had that particular smile people use when delivering bad news they think is good. "Welcome to Pine Valley Estates, Daniel Harper," she announced, stepping into my foyer without invitation, her sensible pumps clicking on my hardwood floors. "I'm Margaret Wilson, president of the Homeowners Association. Your property technically falls outside our boundaries, but that's merely administrative. You're part of our community now, which means landscape guidelines, architectural review, seasonal decorations." I cut her off gently but firmly, blocking her path to the living room. "Margaret, I bought this house specifically because it's not in your HOA. I won't be participating in your association or following your rules. My property, my decisions." Her smile froze like I'd suggested the earth was flat. She adjusted her blazer, the gold HOA president pin glinting. "That's an incredibly selfish perspective, Daniel. Property values depend on everyone contributing. Your neighbors expect cooperation and respect for our shared values." The way she said shared values made it clear resistance violated some sacred suburban commandment. I showed her to the door with the same courtesy I'd use for a Jehovah's Witness. "Appreciate the welcome, but I'm good. Have a nice day." That should have ended it. A polite disagreement, mutual understanding of boundaries. Everyone moves on. But Margaret Wilson didn't do boundaries. And she certainly didn't handle rejection well from someone she considered beneath her authority. The harassment began 48 hours later. My mailbox received its first violation notice, official-looking document on HOA letterhead claiming the post violated color standards. It was forest green. Apparently, only colonial white was acceptable. Another cited my lawn edging as improperly maintained, despite my landscaper's weekly visits. A third complained my porch lights created visual pollution for neighboring properties. Each included fines starting at $100, escalating $50 daily, with threats of legal action. I filed them in the trash where they belonged, but noted the postmarks, always delivered by hand, never mailed. Margaret was just warming up. She became my personal paparazzi. I'd be trimming hedges and spot her across the street with her phone, photographing from multiple angles. She'd measure my fence height with a tape measure, comparing to neighbors. One evening, I found her timing how long my car sat in my driveway after 7 p.m. Apparently, visitor parking hours ended at 6, even for the homeowner. She built a filing system that would impress the FBI, complete with color-coded folders and cross-reference citations to bylaws that didn't apply to my property. The social media campaign was masterful in its subtlety. She joined every neighborhood group. Nextdoor, the Pine Valley Facebook page, local parenting forums, posting about certain residents who refused to respect standards and were actively destroying property values through selfish noncompliance. She never used my name. She was too clever for libel, but posted photos of my house next to complaints about declining standards, spreadsheets comparing my lawn maintenance to neighbors, before and after shots implying my neglect was spreading like blight. Within weeks, she'd convinced half the neighborhood I was some antisocial monster threatening their biggest investment. I'd wave politely to neighbors who'd once smiled. Now they looked away. The mailman started delivering packages to the wrong house. Someone egged my garage door. Kids on bikes rode past yelling, "HOA violator." I installed security cameras, not the cheap ones, but professional grade with night vision and cloud storage. Evidence, I told myself, just in case. The breaking point came that November morning when Margaret filmed me openly. I was in my robe, hair uncombed, fetching the paper. She stood on the sidewalk, public property, technically legal, but angled her phone aggressively. "Is there a specific reason you're recording me on my own property, Margaret?" I asked, staying on my side of the property line I'd had professionally surveyed and marked with brass caps. She held the phone higher. "Documenting the deterioration of community standards. Your refusal to participate creates dangerous precedents, encouraging other residents to ignore civic responsibilities. Property values are declining because of your behavior." That evening, I spread county records across my kitchen table and started digging like a man possessed. Everyone assumed Crystal Lake belonged to the HOA. Families fished there every weekend, kids swam in summer, parents hosted sunset gatherings with wine and folding chairs. Margaret constantly referenced lake access as the premier HOA benefit, justifying $150 monthly fees and strict compliance as necessary to maintain this shared community amenity. But the deed records told a different story. Crystal Lake wasn't HOA property, wasn't county property, wasn't state property. According to the county clerk's database, 15 acres of water and shoreline were owned by Harold Jenkins, 83 years old, who'd inherited it from his father in 1978. The HOA had been using it for decades without legal right, building their entire authority structure around controlling access to someone else's property. I spent 4 hours cross-referencing property maps, surveyor reports, deed transfers. The lake was completely independent, but Margaret had established herself as gatekeeper, issuing permits for boat usage, enforcing rules about shoreline activities, collecting fees partly justified by waterfront privileges, all while having zero legal standing. I called Harold Jenkins the next morning. His phone number was in the property records. He answered on the second ring, voice gravelly but sharp. Jenkins' residence, Harold speaking. I could hear Fox News in the background. When I explained I was calling about his lake property, there was a long pause. Well, I'll be damned, he said slowly. First person to ask about legal ownership in 30 years. Inherited it with the old farmhouse, but moved to assisted living 5 years ago when arthritis got too bad to maintain the place. Been thinking of selling to someone who'll give it the attention it deserves. My pulse raced. Margaret's entire power structure was built on controlling property she didn't own. Would you consider discussing a sale? I live right on the water and want to preserve it for future generations. Another pause, then a chuckle. Son, I think that's exactly what this lake needs. Someone who understands the difference between caring for something and controlling it. Saturday morning work for you. Saturday dawned crisp and clear. Harold met me at the lake's edge at 8 o'clock sharp, moving slow but steady in worn boots, eyes bright blue and missing nothing. He was shorter than I'd imagined, maybe 5 feet 6 inches, with weathered hands that had clearly worked this land for decades. 15 acres of pristine water stretched before us, surrounded by mature oaks and maples just starting to turn, with a natural sandy beach and several small coves perfect for fishing. Wasn't just property. Was an ecosystem. Herons hunting in the shallows, bass jumping at dawn, turtles sunning on logs. Beautiful morning for this conversation, Harold said, shaking my hand with a grip still surprisingly firm. He spread documents on his old Ford pickup's hood, original deed from 1952 when his father bought it for $800, survey maps, property tax records, all protected in plastic sleeves. Clear title, no liens, no easements beyond basic environmental protections. The legal documentation was pristine. Harold owned every inch of water, every foot of shoreline, all mineral rights below the lake bed. The HOA had been operating under collective delusion for decades. What kind of timeline for a sale? I asked, trying to sound casual while my mind raced. Price range in mind. Harold folded documents carefully, looking out over the water like saying goodbye to an old friend. I'm 83, Daniel. Wife passed 2 years ago. Kids live in California and Colorado. Can't take care of this place anymore. Was thinking 180 would be fair. Before I could respond, car doors slammed. Margaret Wilson marched down the slope with 2 board members, Sandra Mitchell and Tom Reynolds, face thunderous, briefcase swinging like a battering ram. I started recording on my phone, capturing every word. Harold Jenkins, what exactly is going on here? Margaret demanded, ignoring pleasantries. Sandra called saying you're meeting with this troublemaker about selling our community lake. Harold straightened to his full height. My property, Margaret. I'll discuss it with whoever I choose. Don't recall asking your permission. Margaret's briefcase hit the ground with a crack. This lake has been part of our community amenities for over 20 years. Residents pay monthly fees specifically for waterfront access. You can't sell it out from under us. She yanked open her briefcase, papers spilling. I can and will, Harold replied calmly. Check your HOA documents. Show me where your association has any legal claim. Show me any contract giving you ownership or usage rights. I've let your people use it out of neighborly courtesy, but courtesy isn't ownership. Margaret's hands shook as she rifled through documents. I could see desperation growing as she realized her carefully organized bylaws meant nothing for property she didn't own. A vein pulsed at her temple. This is ridiculous, she exploded, stepping forward. We'll file complaints with the county, contact environmental agencies, challenge the sale in court. Actually, I said, holding up my recording phone, threatening to harass someone exercising property rights could be criminal intimidation. Harold, perhaps we should continue privately. I can have my attorney here in an hour. Margaret's eyes widened as she realized every threat was documented. Sandra and Tom started backing toward their car. $200,000, I said loudly. Cash offer, 30-day closing, no contingencies. Harold's eyebrows rose. Margaret looked ready to stroke out. Very generous, Harold said slowly. But understand, you're inheriting a war with someone who doesn't grasp legal boundaries. Counting on it, I replied. She's made my life hell for months with authority she doesn't have. Time she learned what real ownership means. Margaret stood speechless as Harold drove away. Then she found her voice. If you buy this lake, we'll make your life hell, she screamed at my retreating back. You already have, I called over my shoulder. Difference is, now I'll have legal authority to stop it. See you Monday afternoon. I'll be posting new lake access policies. Monday morning, I walked out of First National Bank with a cashier's check for $200,000 burning a hole in my jacket. Harold's attorney, Patricia Chun, a sharp woman in her 60s, had everything prepared. The closing took 47 minutes. When Patricia handed me the final deed with my name as owner, Harold smiled with genuine relief. Take better care of her than I could, Daniel, he said, looking toward the lake sparkling in the distance. That water's been in my family over 40 years. Trusting you to keep it special. I assured him the lake would be preserved, though I didn't mention the management changes planned for unauthorized users. I drove straight to Murphy Construction. Tom Murphy had built half the county's custom waterfront homes. His office walls displayed photos of docks that looked like luxury resort brochures. So you bought the Jenkins Lake, Tom said, reviewing my survey. Beautiful piece of water. What project you thinking? I described my vision. Professional-grade dock system, 60-foot main pier into deep water, 30-foot T extension for boat mooring, covered pavilion for entertaining. Built from pressure-treated lumber with marine-grade hardware to last decades. Most importantly, positioned clearly visible from Margaret Wilson's living room window across the cove. That's going to be a statement, Tom said, sketching on graph paper. Run you about $35,000, but it'll add significant value. Got permits lined up. I'd spent Sunday at the county planning office. Process was straightforward for owners with clear title, environmental assessment, structural review, water district approval. All expedited for standard projects. Applications submitted this morning. Environmental pre-approval came through. Can start Monday if you're available. Tom's expression shifted to concern. Moving fast. Any timeline pressure I should know about? Let's say I have neighbors taking unauthorized liberties with this property for years. Once construction begins, want no confusion about ownership or access rights. Prominent dock establishes clear boundaries. Tom nodded, understanding dawning. While he worked on plans, I ordered custom signs from Superior Signage. Professional metal with weather-resistant lettering on galvanized steel posts driven 3 feet deep. Private property, no trespassing. Pine Valley Estates HOA, no authority beyond this point. And facing Margaret's house, Margaret Wilson specifically prohibited. Tuesday morning brought slow-driving cars past my house, passengers craning necks. The social media speculation must have been intense. Margaret appeared at my door Wednesday afternoon in casual clothes, attempted different approach. Her smile was strained, manila folder in hand. Daniel, think we got off on the wrong foot. Been researching the lake situation, maybe irregularities benefiting both of us if we work together. What kind of irregularities? She brightened, pulling printed pages. 20 years of community amenity usage may create implied easement rights. Environmental regulations may prevent major modifications without community input. I smiled at her amateur research. Implied easements require owners' knowledge and consent. Harold explicitly said usage was courtesy. Permits are approved. Want to see copies? Margaret flushed, but shifted strategy. HOA willing to purchase access rights for reasonable annual fee. Formalize existing arrangement. Already made plans not including HOA involvement. Construction starts Monday. New access policies posted this weekend. Her smile cracked. This isn't over. You still live in this neighborhood. Community relationships matter. Actually, Margaret, this is exactly over. You've harassed me for months with authority you didn't have. Now I have legal standing to enforce my decisions. She stormed to her car. Construction couldn't start soon enough. Monday, 7 a.m., Murphy's crew arrived with military precision. 3 trucks loaded with lumber, hardware, concrete footings. Permits posted prominently. Foreman Jake Sullivan walked the shoreline, marking foundation points. Margaret appeared at 8:15 in her navy blazer armor, clipboard thick with papers. Stopped construction immediately. Violates ordinances and regulations. Filed complaints with building inspector, environmental office, water district. Jake held up environmental approval. All permits current, ma'am. Margaret began recording, pacing the property line, shouting about noise ordinances, environmental damage, safety hazards. The crew worked through her theatrics with professional calm. Building inspector arrived 11:15, reviewed everything, verdict, work matches plans, quality exceeds requirements. Margaret followed him to his truck arguing about corruption until Jake asked her to move from the work zone. She continued commentary from the sidewalk with increasing desperation. By lunchtime, dock framework was visible, 60 feet extending into deep water. Margaret disappeared for 2 hours, returned with reinforcements. 3 board members looking uncomfortable. This project destroys property values, Margaret announced. Demand suspension until community input. I addressed the group calmly. I'm Daniel Harper, legal owner. Construction properly permitted. Research facts before supporting her campaigns. Board members exchanged glances. One asked about compromise. This is private property. Nothing to compromise. Margaret's face purpled as her support eroded. By 4:30, framework complete, decking begun. Board members retreated to cars. Friday afternoon, dock finished, spectacular resort quality installation. Signs installed Monday afternoon. Margaret's first removal attempt came Tuesday, 18 hours later. Security cameras caught her with crowbar attacking the sign facing her house. The galvanized post bent her crowbar. She exhausted herself against immovable objects. These signs are illegal harassment, she screamed. County code enforcement arrived Wednesday, inspected, conclusion, completely legal. Owners have brought authority to ban individuals for cause. Thursday brought supplementary signs, private dock, no HOA access. Actual property ownership required. Margaret organized community awareness meeting in her backyard. I watched from dock, recording. About 15 neighbors heard her unhinged theories about legal conspiracies. Meeting ended when someone asked for documentation of HOA lake rights. Margaret couldn't produce any. Friday morning, I installed information board with property map, deed copies, and framed photo of Margaret vandalizing signs with explanatory text. She discovered it at 10:30 and completely lost composure, screaming, attacking plexiglass with fists. Saturday brought Margaret's community rights restoration rally, 20 people with signs. I sat on dock reading, recording. Margaret screamed through megaphone about stolen resources. I responded calmly across water. No community rights ever existed. Courtesy ended with ownership change. When challenged for documentation, Margaret stammered. Crowd dissolved as people realized they'd supported baseless claims. Margaret stood alone surrounded by abandoned signs. Tuesday, 6:37 a.m. Cameras caught Margaret in black clothing, wire cutters in hand. She cut through perimeter fence, marched onto dock, sat in protest posture. I called sheriff while recording. Deputy Kevin Morrison arrived as Margaret declared civil disobedience. Ma'am, step off this dock. You're trespassing with documented fence destruction. This has been community property for 20 years. Ownership determined by deeds. You're under arrest. Margaret's meltdown was spectacular, thrashing, screaming about police corruption while neighbors watched their former HOA president handcuffed on my dock. Video went viral locally. 3 weeks later, Jennifer Mitchell, new HOA president, called. Margaret resigned after arrest, facing criminal charges, restraining order, anger management. Her abuses exposed, unexplained expenses, harassment of multiple families. HOA implemented transparency, apologized, presented me Community Service Award. I created permit system, reasonable fees, scheduled times, clear rules. Families fished safely, hosted events. Property values rose. Dock became gathering spot, sunsets, birthdays, Halloween parties with 30 families confirmed. Margaret occasionally drives past, face bitter through car window. Restraining order keeps distance. Community thrives without her. Children learn fishing from grandparents. Signs remain as boundary reminders. Message shifted to protection. On perfect October evenings, I sit on my dock watching sunsets paint golden reflections across water that belongs completely, legally, to me. The heron hunts in shallows. Laughter echoes from permitted gatherings. Security cameras record memories, not meltdowns. Margaret Wilson destroyed herself trying to control what was never hers. Real authority comes from legal ownership and responsible stewardship, not neighborhood bullying. This is what victory looks like. Peaceful water, happy families, and the permanent silence of a tyrant who learned too late that courtesy revoked is courtesy lost forever. What about you? Have you ever faced neighborhood injustice or witnessed someone confuse authority with ownership? Share your stories in the comments, especially about standing up to bullies or protecting your rights. Where do you draw the line between community standards and individual freedom? Let's discuss.